Good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. I was reading the National Review and I came across a piece about how Khloe Kardashian could save the world. It was something to that effect, the title. And of course, it was intriguing enough that I read it. And it had to do with surrogacy. And I'm going to talk about the case pertaining to Khloe herself in this commentary. But I also want to highlight the grander problem of surrogacy and the damage that that does to marriage, to family, to women, and to children. Technology, it's given our modern society astonishing abilities, especially with the way we have enhanced our understanding of reproductive science. I think the problem here is the same problem that Ian Malcolm has always diagnosed, that our scientists have been too preoccupied with whether or not we could, that we never stop to think whether or not we should. And our civilization is now learning that while nature can be manipulated, it can only be done so for so long before human nature demands its own accounting before Almighty God. And so the modern surrogacy industry, that's one of the clearest examples of this. It transforms pregnancy and the carrying of a child, an immortal soul, into a commercial arrangement. Every new legal dispute in this front exposes yet another contradiction because advocates for this industry will seek rights over the child that they themselves will willingly skirt if the conditions are met a certain way. The problem is, reality will defeat the ideology at the end of the day, but the greater problem with those who are proponents of the movement is that they refuse negotiation until reality blows up in their faces. I'll give you an example. A recent Canadian lawsuit. This is why this entire enterprise rests upon an impossible foundation. It's quite literally a house of cards in this sense. Unfortunate same-sex couple. They sued their surrogate mother after she refused to eradicate the child at 22 weeks when prenatal testing suggested that the child had a cleft lip and other possible defects. So the surrogate essentially evoked the contract, the exercise authority over the woman and the child. The commissioning parents, these two, the same-sex people, they insisted that the pregnancy should follow their wishes to the letter. The child was theirs. It belonged to them as a commodity. And so each side appealed to the autonomy argument because the surrogate mother said no. And so the slogan was "My body, my choice" that was evoked in the court case. It was inconvenient all of a sudden to the progressivist movement once the contractual expectations collided with what is essentially biological fact. Ironically, popular culture experienced that years ago. During an episode of Keeping Up with the Kardashians, there was one of the characters, her name is Khloe Kardashian. She expressed surprise after learning that surrogates retain legal authority over their own medical decisions during pregnancy, because she assumed that the intended parents who were contracting her controlled every decision because the child was ostensibly theirs. Her legal advisor then responded with the uncomfortable simplicity that the pregnancy remained hers because it was another woman's body. And that conversation was tricky. It had to do with if multiple children were conceived, the surrogate mother could choose to eradicate the other children at her own choice. And so when you go back to that original Canadian lawsuit, it's revealing something much larger than that one disagreement. Every surrogacy arrangement divides motherhood into this concept of biological motherhood and genetic motherhood and legal motherhood and social motherhood. And all of these are artificial scalpels that we take to God's plan for the human person, for marriage and the family. And unfortunately, we are so prideful and obstinate that we fight to reject it. But here's the thing. Nature comes due with a bill every single time because the laws of nature cannot be broken. Another famous case was brought to my attention some years ago. Television personality. Her name is Sherri Shepherd. She was a host on The View. She entered a surrogacy arrangement with her then husband, now former husband, Lamar Sally. And this was done through donor eggs and Lamar's sperm. And after their marriage collapsed, Sherri Shepherd attempted to withdraw from the arrangement of the child legally. And the surrogate woman is at this point pregnant with the child. Pennsylvania courts did not side with her desire to break the contract. It enforced the contract because the agreements had already been executed. And so Shepherd is now the child's legal mother, despite possessing not only no biological connection to the child, Sherry Shepherd now also has no legal relationship with the father of the child. The courts ordered monthly child support exceeding $4,000 a month to be paid to, in this case, the father of the child. And so the Pennsylvania Supreme Court also declined review of the case during 2016, and it permanently established her legal obligations as mother. That decision satisfied the contract law, but we all have to admit there's something morally really confusing about the whole thing. Motherhood has now become a judicial designation that can be spliced every which way depending on what a particular justice of the peace wants to uphold at the time. And so lawyers are trying to fight to determine maternal identity through contract paperwork. And judges are going to continue to inherit these questions because modern medicine went ahead and played with forces well beyond their control. Whether we like it or not, we have kicked this problem to the courts. They are unwilling referees for what are ostensibly real moral conflicts before Almighty God. And this pattern repeats itself because surrogacy transforms children into subjects of negotiated expectations, commodities. Every contract will specify obligations pertaining to the end result of the child as a product. Not a single reference to the fact that the child has an immortal soul and is a full human person with rights. And that's why every agreement tries to come up with acceptable outcomes to all parties except the ultimate good of the child. And so the language of production is what permeates the entire sphere, and it's overtaken the language of parenthood. Pope Francis, during his lifetime in Dignitas Infinita, he condemned surrogacy. This is what he said: "I deem deplorable the practice of so-called surrogate motherhood. It represents a grave violation of the dignity of woman and the child, based on the exploitation of situations of the mother's material needs. A child is always a gift and never the basis of a commercial contract." That same declaration further teaches the legitimate desire to have a child cannot be transformed into a right to a child that fails to respect the dignity of that child as the recipient of the gift of life. Why? Because commerce and the treating of a child as a product inherently becomes a violation of the dignity of the person that is the child, that God has endowed an immortal soul to. So you go back to Dignitas Infinita and it teaches the child has the right to have a fully human and not artificially induced origin, and to receive the gift of a life that manifests both the dignity of the giver and that of the receiver. And that's why it's going to echo Humane Vitae, Paul VI, the inseparable connection established by God, which man on his own initiative may not break, between the unitive significance and the procreative significance, are both inherent to the marriage act. The act of two bodies coming together must be, whether or not that act is going to result in conception that particular moment, it must be, by virtue of God's design, both unitive and procreative, both binding in the sacramental good of the spouses and possessing the capacity to bring forth new life. Now, I can go on and on with quoting a tremendous amount of authors that have spoken into this reality. But the fact of the matter is we as Christians have to ensure that the ethical and moral realities of this issue is going to withstand whatever cultural pressures of our day. Every child has a right to receive of the dignity that has been given to them by Almighty God. It is God who endows it upon them. Christ entered the world through the loving union of the Holy Family and salvation history. That itself presents to us a completely beautiful model. Every Christian has an obligation to defend God's design of marriage and motherhood and fatherhood and childhood courageously, because nothing short of the immortal salvation of souls and the good of children is at stake. Stay tuned, I'm Marcus Peter.